how an abandoned house in the countryside was transformed in 53 working days. The first thing I started with was a thorough sorting of all the belongings. The house was so cluttered with junk that I stopped counting the amount of trash I hauled out after just the first few days. I set about a complete cleanup, the room, the kitchen, the hallway, the attic. I cleared everything out of old stuff. Next, I moved on to removing the wallpaper to get to the real wooden log walls. There turned out to be more work than it seemed at first glance. I stripped the wallpaper off in layers. The paint was stubbornly holding on. For several days in a row, it was just silence, dust, and endless work with the angle grinder. I cleaned the walls in two stages. First, I removed the main layer, then went over the spaces between the logs, in the corners and seams, preparing the surface for the decorative coating. By my calculations, I collected about 30 bags of dust just from the walls. As soon as I finished with the walls, I started working on the ceiling beams. I removed the old paint in various ways, with an angle grinder, a heat gun, and experimented with a Coral Alpha disc. I also used paint remover. The next step was working on the doorways to the kitchen and the room. I started disassembling the doors down to the last screw, cleaning and restoring them so I could reassemble them and give them new life. I used an angle grinder, sanding discs, clamps, and carpenter's glue. All that's left is to sand and paint. Unfortunately, I had to dismantle the stove. The chimneys had burned through, there were cracks everywhere, and it was impossible to restore it. For safety reasons, it had to be completely removed. The ceiling didn't go unnoticed either. The old plywood had sagged, a lot of dirt and even pests had accumulated. I completely dismantled it. Repairs and painting are ahead. I took apart the windows and scraped off 5 or 6 layers of paint from the frames. The work dragged on because of the quantity. 6 windows in the room and 1 large one in the kitchen. The angle grinder and sanding discs worked non-stop. I'm keeping the frames, but I'll be making the outer sashes myself with a budget double-glazed unit. I've also decided to keep the casings. For now, I removed just one to work out the restoration technique, preserving as many details as possible even though time takes its toll. The rest will come later, but that's a story for future episodes. Then it was time to raise the house itself. Over the years, the building had settled, so I had to use jacks, spacers, and a sledgehammer. I managed to do it all by myself in a single day. The hallway also underwent a complete reconstruction. I dismantled the partitions, removed the ceiling cladding, took out the lintels, leveled the floor, and relocated the electrical wiring. I dismantled the windows and facade to rebuild everything from scratch with insulation. I'm using old boards. The frame is made from 100 by 50 mm boards. The final finish will be birch plywood and paneling. A new floor has also been installed and all the logs have been cleaned. An amazing pattern was revealed. Work on the hallway continues. All that's left is to treat and paint everything and finish all the joints. This area will be a utility room with a boiler, storage tank, shower, and bathroom. The yard is not being neglected either. I mow the 200 square meter lawn every week. I decided to leave the floors in the room and kitchen in their original state. Sanding took longer than expected. Dust, noise, and dirt, but the result is worth it. I did the work in 2 stages. First, I removed the old paint with an alpha disc, then switched to a polishing machine and finished sanding to the final result. I also started preparing to treat the wooden surfaces against bugs. See you next time in the new episodes. Bye everyone!